This is not a very technical talk. This is more of an introductory talk. This is a fully interactive talk. I'm going to get you guys involved. I'm going to get you guys engaged. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun. It probably won't last the full hour, but we are going to have some fun. And I'm trying to think if there's any other disclaimers that need to be done at this point. I'll remember them in the middle of the presentation. So the title of this is We Built This, and so can you. Really looking at open source and the impact that open source has in the information security world. And this is a fantastic talk to come off the skirts of Trey's keynote, and hopefully you'll find out why. Just a little bit about me. My name's Tim Fowler. I'm a security consultant out of Nashville, North Carolina. I love interacting with people, so if you have questions, comments, completely positive feedback, all negative will be completely rejected. Just kidding. You can follow me on Twitter and things like that. Quick show of hands. Who's this your first security conference? Yes. I'm sorry, you guys. I'll try to do the best. No, I'm actually really glad you guys are here. The entire staff for BSides is just fantastic. They've done an amazing job, great speakers. The reason why these events are so successful is because of you guys. Most of us as speakers, we spend all year trying to figure out how to entertain guys, how to educate you guys, and really how to enrich your lives. And so if you guys don't show up, we have nothing to talk about, nothing to say. We'll still talk, but it's not as entertaining. So a little bit more about this is just general. The biggest one's going to be at the bottom. In a previous life, I've done a lot of open source development. I have a very unique perspective on open source in terms of information security. Basically, every iteration of my professional career has been centered around open source, including my information security career. This is not something that's generally talked about in terms of introduction to information security. We talk about like how to get into pen tests. You want to be a pen testing. If you guys just saw that last presentation, it was absolutely fantastic, and she's like 100% right about everything. I'm the consultant, so everything that she said, yeah, that's me, and stuff. But in order to kind of understand the role that open source plays in information security and why it matters, we've kind of got to look at the genesis of open source. And we're going to answer a few questions today. But before we get started, in the actual, we're on 3 of 412, I need a couple of volunteers. I'm not going to tell you what you're volunteering for. All right. If you'll come up here first. Okay. So one of the things I like to do live demonstrations, but how do you demonstrate a concept of open source? It's this thing, it's an entity, like it's this belief system. How do you demonstrate it? So what I figured out is we're going to go back to our childhood days and we're going to play with Legos. Okay, so here's your task. In this box is a set of Legos. There's actually 3 different little sets and a set of instructions. All I want you to do is build something. That's it. That's all she's got to do. Okay, and we're going to come back to this. No big hurry, but as fast as possible. Go. Are you done? No, I'm just kidding. We work in really tight timelines in information security. And we'll get back to this, and this is going to be a great representation as we move forward. But what we're going to look at is what is open source? It's kind of important. Why does it matter? That's the next question. But more specifically, why does it matter in information security? And I'm guessing most of you guys are here in the green track because you either have a desire to get into information security, you're just starting out, you're trying to get traction and stuff. You're generally just asking a lot of questions, and the one that everybody is inevitably going to ask about any industry, any technology, or anything like that is, how do I get started? And so hopefully in the next few minutes we'll be able to go all through that. If you did notice, I was joking about the 412 slides. There's not that many. I can't do that many in a day. So what is open source? Open source is traditionally, we refer to it and reference it in talking about source code, software, applications. We've got a technical definition here. It says open source denotes software for which the original source may be made freely available and redistributed and modified. This is a highly technical definition of open source, okay? When you hear people talk about open source, this is generally what they're referring to. But this is changing. This is changing very rapidly. We're starting to get into the ideas of open hardware. Anybody use Raspberry Pi? HackRF? These are open source hardware platforms. It denotes the same principle here. It's just we're not talking about source code. We're just talking about how chips are made and the underlying operating systems in those chips and different things like that. And so this is the highly technical definition. We're going to mostly step away from this and go get a little more granular with it. Because open source is so much more than just actual bits and bytes and codes and stuff like that and being able to look at it. It's really a philosophy. It's a way that we make decisions. It's kind of this idealistic approach to the world. If you come from a Linux background like I do, Richard Stallman is he's a big proponent of what's called free software, and in order to be free software, it has to adhere to the 4 software freedoms. I'm not what I classify as a Stallmanite. I fully respect his opinion, but I have some discrepancies and stuff. But it isn't ideal. It's a community, okay? But it's also not just a singular community. It's a bunch of communities working in tangent with each other to perform to create an ecosystem, very much the way we have in information security. As the previous speaker indicated, you want to get into penetration testing. Well, you're going to have to be a little more specific. There's a lot of different areas within penetration testing that you can kind of fall into. And the same thing it's with open source. But it even goes further than that as to what open source is really about. At the root of it, open source is about transparency. Let's get rid of the secrets. Let's don't hide. Let's put our stuff out there for the world. Open source is about peer production. I don't have to do it by myself. I can utilize other people, but more importantly, I can have other people go behind me and validate my work. Peer review. It's probably a phrase that most people are familiar with. Peer review in science journals and medical research and all this other stuff. There's a reason that it's so important in what I classify as the sciences, because it's the means of which you get validation. Open source allows for, it's inherently designed for peer review, for the ability for me to write something or produce something to you go in and scrutinize it. Okay? You may be wrong, I may be wrong, we may both be wrong when it's all said and done. But we have that freedom, we have that luxury. Open source is also about distribution. One of the things to be classified as an open source project, you have to have what's called an open source license applied. The same way that we have software licensing, we have the equivalent in open source. And with that, it basically gives you the permission and the rights to distribute it however you want. And that's really, really cool. That I can take something that somebody else has produced, and then I can give it to somebody. I can share it with my friends. I'm not restricted. And part of this goes back to that transparency thing. But up in this point, we're still kind of really talking about the heart of open source, which is around the code. I have spent many, many years at open source conferences. I think it's really cool because I'm talking open source at a security conference today. Tuesday, I'm talking security at an open source conference. I've done this. I've been on both sides and stuff. And so it gets so frustrating because all we talk about is code, 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 code. How many here are programmers? Okay, a couple of you. How many of you are not programmers? Most of you, okay? Everybody's going to get something. We're not going to just talk about code. In fact, open source does not start or stop with code. It's just one of the elements of code. I believe in my heart of hearts that the absolute base premise of open source, where it starts, the genesis of it, is with a conversation. It's very important when you have technical concepts, technical works, lots of coding, going, how does this work? Has anybody ever asked that question? How does this work? Why does this work? Why does it work this way? Or my favorite, why did you do it that way? That's typically what my bosses will ask. And it starts with a conversation. It starts with a dialogue. One of the things that Trey this morning hit on was about the sharing of secrets, or the sharing of data, not making them secrets. How do you do that? Okay, you have a conversation. Now, in his proposition of being able to share data and things, we're going to have a conversation about how to actually start the conversation. But that's where it starts. We've got to start somewhere. And fundamentally, open source, every project that I've ever been a part of, every community that I've ever been in, it actually started with a conversation. It didn't start with a piece of code. It didn't even really start with an idea. The idea was formulated out of a conversation. So how's our Legos coming? Awesome. Let me know when you're finished. There are more Legos to come, I promise. So why does duplicated 2 slides. Awesome. It starts with a conversation. That's doubly important. Why does open source matter? This is where I get on a soapbox. Understand that open source is inherently a community. It's very idea-driven. These are my ideas. Okay? These are my ideals. I'm not necessarily right. I'm drawing off the experiences and the information that I have. I'm taking the knowledge, the hard facts of my experiences, and I've produced this. Okay? If you're in the open source world, you disagree with me, awesome. Let's have a conversation, because that's how change gets started. So the number one reason that open source matters is because it allows access without restriction. Okay? I was going to put in here that open source doesn't discriminate. And I took it back because, unfortunately, there is some discrimination in open source, but it mostly comes from the human beings that are managing open source projects. But at the absolute base element, open source does not restrict access to anybody. Okay? It dissolves borders in a lot of cases. I can do things in open source that enterprises are doing with 7-figure salaries. Why? Because I'm not restricted by access. Half the time when we spend money on vendors and stuff, we're really just paying for access to knowledge. Open source has given us this knowledge, in most cases, for free. But also, the transparency allows for audits and assessments of the code for potential issues. How many people have paid attention to what's going on in the world over the last couple of years? All I got to say is OpenSSL. Okay? Lots of people are very frustrated with OpenSSL. I'm going to tell you why you should not be frustrated with OpenSSL. We're reviewing it. We're finding problems and we're patching them. Instead of just going, yep, it's there, it's this monolithic thing, we're not going to touch it, we're going to hope it's secure. We hope it's secure. We're not taking that approach. It's open, it's available, we're going to find the problems. There's going to be problems. I'm a wireless guy. That's my domain of expertise. And I do really, really crazy and potentially scary things in the RF spectrums. And one of the things I love about wireless is we have continuously broken it over and over and over again. Well, they'll come up with a standard. They'll come up with the implementation. All of our wonderful hackers are going like, yeah, that's not good enough. Let me show you why. They go back to the drawing board. They come up with a different alternative. We break that again. And it creates this entire life cycle of development. This is one of the things that open source allows us to do very, very easily, is that we have the ability to perform these audits, perform these assessments. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you one of the drawbacks of this very same policy of transparency. Anybody familiar with the bystander syndrome or bystander effect? It's basically the concept that if you're in a large group of people and somebody falls under distress, everybody walks around them because somebody else is going to take a look after them. Whereas statistically, if there's just two or a few people and somebody falls under distress, everybody will run to their aid. We suffer this in open source. It's, hey, code's available, go check it out. Nobody actually goes and checks it out because everybody else is going to do it. Somebody else, I don't have the time, somebody else will take care of it. So this is a problem with open source. This is part of the problem with OpenSSL, is it went so long without us actually doing any kind of assessments, looking at what the actual implementations and security things are. So it is a little bit of a two-edged sword, but the advantage is us, we have the access, we have the rights. You as individuals, you have the ability, if you have the technical proficiency, you can go and do it. There's nothing stopping you. You just have to make the decision. Open source empowers people in ways that are just amazing, but it also allows us to produce things at an alarming rate, but we're also able to take things that we may not have built ourselves, okay, and build upon them to produce something in its entirety. How are we coming? We done? All right, awesome. So which one do we get? Okay, we've got a, so I didn't get your name.
Kelsey.
Kelsey, all right. So we have a Lego set here. And traffic cones. Oh, this is awesome. Yay, Lego. I really like Legos, by the way. So what she has built here is like this little bulldozer-like car. Okay? Lego was very kind enough to do a few things for her. First of all, she provided all the source material that was required to build this. Okay? She didn't guess at how to build it. She didn't go and have to figure out how to build the pieces, plastic injection molding, if you've ever done that, that's always fun. She had everything she needed to produce the results that Lego had originally designed. But she had one more advantage that Lego also provided. And we're going to get a little more into this in a little bit. But she also had the supporting documentation for every single one of these pieces. Okay? Is everybody with me right now? No, okay. This is a model of how open source works. Okay? We have a bunch of components. Lego desired for her to make this. She made this. She didn't have any issues with this. Okay? This is awesome. Good job. You can actually keep this when it's all said and done. So we've got a product here that was produced, that's open source and stuff. So I need another volunteer. All right, you come up, sir. So we've got what we're going to call the InfoSec mobile here. Now what I want you to do is take a completely separate set under the same constraints that Lego set forth for this one. And I want you to combine these two into something that's never existed. Okay? And let me know when you're done. Obviously, you guys should probably have an understanding of where this thing is going. We have no idea what he's about to turn out. Hopefully it's amazing, but we don't know. But what he's doing is he's taking a predefined construct that has been set forth by somebody making decisions, in this case Lego, and he's about to turn it completely on its head. They never intended for him to produce, well actually they technically did, but they have no idea what he's going to produce. But they have given him the liberties without restrictions to produce whatever's about to come out. This is what open source does. It is extremely powerful, and you can harness this in really cool ways. So it allows for someone to build upon the works of another to produce something that may not have been possible otherwise. In this scenario, whatever he builds was not possible without her work. He doesn't have to recreate her work. He has it. He has the access. He has the ability to utilize it. Now he's going to add his own flair, his own twist, and we're going to have a brand new product. So, it doesn't require you to have all the answers. Okay? Anybody working a job where you are the go-to person? Got a technical question? Let's call John. Doesn't matter whether you actually know the answer or not. You're the go-to person. With open source, you don't have to have all the answers. You're not expected to know all the answers because the answers are out there. They're available. It also allows for direct feedback on ideas and concepts. This is not always enjoyable. Sometimes people are mean. They're not exactly compassionate with their criticisms. But this is the world we live in and stuff. But if you've got how many times have you gone to a friend and go like, hey, I got this idea. What are you looking for? You're looking for feedback. Maybe potentially validation of the idea. Or you may be looking for them to go, yeah, that's dumb. And you take that advice and you make some decision based off of it. Well, this is really, really important because feedback is how we keep the conversation going. If I walk up to you and go, hi, I'm Tim Fowler, and you turn around and walk off, conversation's dead. There is no feedback. I don't know what I've done wrong. I don't know what's happened, and I'll never be able to find out. So feedback is something that open source allows to it. How many people have ever commented on Microsoft Windows code? A few of them. It is possible because, believe it or not, Microsoft actually does open up the source of their code to select individuals, researchers, institutions, and stuff. But it's not made publicly available. So some people can actually comment directly in the code. In most cases, not. I released an open source project called Harbinger, Sensor Network Project, back in February. Guess what? If you want to go and comment on that, feel free to. You absolutely can. Because I want the feedback, I need the feedback to continue improvements. And this is what the open source community allows for us to do. What you're going to, if you haven't already figured it out, basically open source enables us as a community to have normal interactions. That's all it is. This is the status quo. I ask you a question, you give me feedback, you give me an answer, you give me a suggestion, you give me an input. I ask you for your thoughts, you give them to me. It's not rocket science. Yet, for some reason, we kind of think of this open source as this like mystical being, and a lot of people do treat it as that, but it's not. Open source matters because it empowers and enables people to reach beyond their own capabilities. Okay? I am not the type of person that can build something from scratch. I've done it. I'm just not very good at it. I had a former boss that called me a technology aggregator, which was, to me, was the biggest compliment that he could ever bestow on me. Because what I have the unique ability to do is take pre-existing systems, meld them together, twist them, make some tweaks to actually produce something that meets the requirements that we have. I'm able to solve a problem without going, well, we're going to have to recreate the wheel first. No, I'm utilizing the wheel. I'm utilizing fire. I'm not having to rediscover everything. No, I'm just leveraging the work that every single person else before me has done. I'm working smarter, not harder. Bosses like that. And so open source gives us this ability. And this is all great because this is really, this is my kind of open source manifesto stuff. But we're here about information security because InfoSec rules. So why does it matter? The number one reason, we move fast. If you pay attention to the information security world, you can wake up in the morning, get on the information superhighway that is Twitter, and we'll talk about Twitter in a moment, and you can start reading a bunch of stuff that's happened overnight. By the time you get to about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that stuff's basically gone. It's already been replaced. We move very, very fast as an industry. We have to because we're always playing from a step behind. Most of the time, we're in the role of detecting stuff, not preventing it. If you're in a blue team perspective, that's your job. I'm in the red team perspective, mostly. Came out of blue team, so I understand it. But we have to move fast. Closed source systems, closed source software, things is a very tedious process. You know, does anybody know what the disclosure process for Microsoft is like? It's not easy. And it could be months and months before you get an actual fix in some kind of update. With open source, we have the ability, under most circumstances, to act really, really quickly. Sometimes in a matter of minutes and hours versus days, weeks, and months. This is awesome because it allows us to curate our core objective of just maintaining some semblance of security. So this is one of the reasons that it matters in information security. Shared knowledge base. How many people know everything I do? Okay? I don't know anything. I don't know a lot of what you guys do. So here's part of the interaction. You, sir, in the black. Can I get your name? Nick. All right. Tell me something that I don't know about you. All right. So he's originally from Wisconsin. Never been to Wisconsin. I heard it's great. I do love cheese. All right. I need another volunteer. Anybody? I'm going to start picking. And when I start picking, all right, you, sir. What piece of information did you just learn that you did not know? Exactly. Shared knowledge base. Okay? When we start a conversation, when we start opening up, we start sharing information, we start to gain collectively. not just as individuals, but collectively as an ecosystem, as a community. As people make discoveries in information security, we all benefit from the disclosure of those discoveries. If we go, yep, I'm going to keep it secret, keep it to myself, nobody else is going to, I want to keep this in my tool bag. Do you know who it benefits? Me. It's the most selfish thing we can do as a community, is to keep, yes, question.
Not really a question, just a comment. I don't think it benefits you either.
It really doesn't. In the long run, you're right. It doesn't. It's a false economy, as Trey said. It looks like it benefits me because I'm the only person that knows about this. But in the long run, it actually does not benefit me. And so I've got a choice. No benefit for anybody, or potentially benefit everybody. Okay? The greater human good, if you believe in that, says we probably should start sharing our information. And I happen to agree. Everyone can see what you're doing. Transparency. Everybody lives in a glass house in open source. It can be scary stuff, but it also can be extremely validating. When somebody goes to, you know what, I looked at your concept and you're right. Yeah, those are the days I live for. Haven't had one yet, but I live for it. But the shared knowledge base allows us to. So there's this cliche, we've all heard it, we are sitting on the shoulders of giants. I don't really like that phrase because I think of it more as we're standing side by side, fighting together. Okay? It's easy for me to ride on somebody's shoulders, but what value have I brought them? But if I'm standing arm in arm with them and everybody next in line with me, now we're stronger. That's where the real value. Just sitting here on top saying, yep, I built my stuff on top of their stuff, or I'm utilizing their information, it actually hasn't provided any value. It's when you start that interaction, when you start engaging with what they have done and what you're doing, that you actually start getting value. It's not about standing on somebody's shoulder. It's actually standing about side by side. There's a reason that when any military people here, former military, thank you guys. I have the utmost respect for anybody that is willing to serve our country in any capacity, whatever. You guys don't go into battle standing on each other's shoulders, do you? I mean, you might have to in one weird situation, but normally that's not standard operating procedure. No, you typically have ranks and files. Why? Because it's effective. Standing on shoulders doesn't really help us. So one of the things is that we can all grab into this shared knowledge base, and we can grow it collectively. As everybody starts making deposits, the entire system is flourishing. But also we have a common goal in information security. It's not that hard, okay? Information security, lots of different avenues, penetration testing, compliance audits, social engineering, just the list keeps going on, you know, systems management, all this other stuff, okay? We basically have one common goal. And that's to secure our stuff. Our systems, our networks, our people. It's hard enough as it is, but why are we doing it alone? This goes to the point that Trey made, okay? We don't have a lot of hard data to support our assumptions. Why not? Because nobody's sharing it. So there's a lot of times in my day-to-day job that I feel alone, going like, I can't be the only one that's dealing with this exact problem or seeing this same thing. No, somebody across the world, right down the street, I don't know where they're at, but somebody out there has to be experiencing the same thing. I just don't know how to find them. I don't know how to collaborate with them. And this is a problem, because if you're left solving a problem all by yourself, guess what? You have no ability to reach outside your capabilities. You just don't, because there's you know, we're a shell of ourselves, and it's so difficult to get outside of that. But when you start putting people together, it goes, you know what? I think you may be onto something, but what if you tried this? And then they back out. And the next thing you know, you've solved the entire problem. Also, why open source matters in information security. It provides answers to questions that have yet to be answered. Anybody ever use Yahoo Answers? Don't lie. All right, in the back. All right, so I love Yahoo Answers for a lot of really probably messed up reasons, because the answers are absolutely hilarious. But what happens is somebody goes on there and they're like, hey, I need to know this. And then what happens is whoever happens to be logged in and sees that question, they offer their best semblance of an answer. Okay? Well, this is very retroactive, meaning that the answer could be sometimes years down the road, because there's people that like to troll people and just answer the question 5 years after they ask. Never done that. Instead of what if we had the answers to the questions before people asked them? What if I stumbled across this problem, you stumbled across a problem, and all of a sudden you decide, you know what, this was really tough. I'm going to document this process. I'm going to report my findings to the world. So all of a sudden, 2 years later, I'm going through the same problem. And all of a sudden it's like, I don't know how to answer this. Let me go to the Googles. And I find your documentation. Guess what? 2 years earlier, you answered the question before I ever had it. You've probably saved me 5, 6 hours of work, potentially, sometimes days. That's pretty cool. And so we do this all the time in information security. Like, this is just what happens. I've been in the open source world for so long, I have no bones about saying this. Information security does open source better than any industry in the world. We get it. We understand it. Everybody else just leeches it. We actually create it. We get this. It's so important because we can provide answers. Okay? I may not have all the answers that you're looking for, but somebody else does. Very few times do you actually come up with a new situation that is 100% unique. And if you find yourself in that position, write it down, share it with the world, because eventually somebody's going to come back to that. So, to understand just how important open source is to information security, anybody recognize any of this stuff? Okay, Kali Linux. Well, first of all, Linux is the largest open source project in the world. Kali's built off of it. That's kind of cool. Social Engineering Toolkit by Dave Kennedy. Guess what? Open source. ReconNG by my good friend Tim Tomes. pfSense, OpenVPN, Mmap, VirtualBox. We can keep going. Open up the Kali tools in Kali Linux. All of that stuff. Somebody's going, you know what? I'm going to write this and I'm going to share it with the world. I use it every single day. Thank you, whoever wrote all of that stuff, because you make my life easier because I don't know how to write it. I simply don't have the answer, don't know how to write that, but they have it, and I can leverage that to come up with the answer that I need for my client or for my situation. So when I say that open source matters in information security, this is living proof. The Metasploit framework, the largest Ruby project in the world. Not just from the lines of code, but also from the sheer number of contributors. The last time I checked, I think it was around 3,000 individual contributors had committed something to the Metasploit framework project. 3,000 people. Try to get 3,000 people to do anything together. It's so hard, but how did it start? It started with a conversation. So, we know what open source is. We know kind of what its role, why it matters, what its importance is. There's one last question. How do we get started? How are we coming on the Legos? Almost done? All right, cool. So, how do we, yes, question.
Do you mind going back to the previous slide, please?
It'll, $5. No, I'm just kidding.
I am actually very new to this conferences, and I'm struggling to understand the assumptions in your argument. So, open source, are you saying open source for the sake of open source, or if you go to a commercial organization, a business, right? Mm-hmm. Any business, like lots of companies, and they're developing a product for their business. Mm-hmm. So, they cannot be open source, right? It is their patents and everything is built on that product, right?
Yeah, so, well, and I'm trying to rephrase your questions to make sure that I actually understand it. So, is your question specifically dealing with like how companies are building stuff off of open source?
No.
Okay.
They have their own idea.
Yeah, they have their own idea.
They have done the research, they have their idea, and they have patent.
Yeah.
Now they want to build a software for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
This concept of open source cannot be applied to that context because it is their idea, it's their business is going to be built on that idea.
Wrong. No, because basically your question is, The question is that you've got a company that's got an idea, they want to produce it, and he's basically saying that open source is kind of counterintuitive to them protecting. And I didn't mean to be so harsh. Anybody familiar with Red Hat? They give their software away for free. They charge for subscriptions. It's all based off of a business model. There's many great open source models in how you can actually monetize giving away something for free. It is a non-traditional business model. Most of them are geared around subscriptions in some form or fashion. But the prime example is, anybody familiar with Snort and SourceFire, the open source IDS? Do you know who bought them? Cisco. Why would Cisco buy something that you can download for free for many, many hundreds of millions of dollars unless they were able to make money off of it? There's ways to make money. It's a very unique ecosystem. You have to be very well in tune with the kind of underpinning of how open source works and how. So from a traditional business sense, you are in fact correct. From the overall arch, I mean, Red Hat's one of the largest technology companies to ever exist. They completely wrote the book on how to make money in open source. What they did was revolutionary. So it is completely possible. But not completely common. And if you want to, we can spend some more time discussing this afterwards if you're really interested. Because like I said, I do have a lot of thoughts and opinions on this because I've been doing it a little bit. Yes?
A lot of people have like an open source version, but then they also have like a professional version of the tool, so you can't pay for support or whatever.
Oh, I took. Yeah, Metasploit. Is that what you said? Yeah, that was, I took it off. Yeah, so the Metasploit framework is the perfect example of that. You've got Metasploit Pro, which is owned by Rapid7. They actually also own Metasploit. They release it for free to the community. If you want to hire functioning, more plugins and different, all this other stuff, like pretty shiny stuff that makes businesses happy, you can pay for it, but you don't have to. That's one of the common elements that we see in business. Okay, open source doesn't just, please don't make the assumption that open source means free. You can make money. You can make lots of money on open source, but you have to know how to do it in the right way, and it is a very unique business structure. But Metasploit is the perfect example of this. Rapid7 makes money off of building off of this. Okay, Metasploit Pro is not its own system. Guess what it's built off of? Metasploit framework. They just add to it. Yes?
Microsoft has stagnated over the years doing just the opposite.
So the statement is that Microsoft has basically stagnated doing just the opposite. And I actually very rarely will do this, but I actually have to applaud Microsoft. They have made some big steps in open source. They just recently open sourced the entire .NET libraries and stuff, which was huge, which means now we can actually natively run it on a Linux environment for the first time ever. Yeah, they stagnated, and what they really, I mean, if you look at what Microsoft is doing, they're making some wholesale shifts to go more in line with where the mainstream current is going. They just announced that they're going to be releasing a Nano server, which is a no GUI. It's basically a Linux server running Windows. It's bare metal. There's a reason. Windows 10 has a package management system that's very similar to apt. Okay, there's a lot of adaptation. What people are finding is that it's very hard to stay relevant in the proprietary source game when you're at that high level, when you have companies like Facebook, Amazon, Google and stuff, where they're piping out open source stuff every single day for people to consume. It's very hard to stay relevant. And so we're actually seeing a very big migration into open source. In fact, I talked to a company that had never done open source, and they're going, we have to do this to stay relevant. And 10 years ago, that is not a conversation you would ever have in a business. Going, we need to give something away to stay relevant. You know, we need to do something. So it's really cool. How am I doing on time? Oh, I got plenty of time. So are you done? Awesome. Can I see what we have?
I searched for precompiled binaries.
Well, see, here's the thing. It's open source, so I can just simply decompile it anyway and reassemble it however I want. So he took the little bulldozer police car thing, and now we have Trey Ford's new airplane. In fact, I think we should give it to him and stuff. So What's really unique about this is the fact that he started with a pre-existing platform, something that had already been built. Okay, we had the little bulldozer. He had a bunch of pieces that were designed to go with something. They were designed to build something. He goes, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to build my own thing. Okay, I'm not sure that this would pass flight regulations and pre-flight checks. But in this context, it doesn't matter because 25 minutes ago, this didn't even exist. Odds are, except for a computer simulation, this exact build has never existed. Okay? He didn't have to do it on his own. He had other people to build upon. He had the original design. He had all the core components. I'm a big proponent of modular design, especially in software. Why? Because it allows you to drag and drop. It allows you to build things not as this monolithic thing, but I don't like that. Now it's my new product. I can remove it. Open source gives me this ability. It also, unfortunately, now I get to relicense this as my own. Sorry. I hope you had a good lawyer. No. There are some interesting legal aspects with open source that we're not going to get into. Open source starts with a conversation. Start a dialogue. Ask a question. Somebody asks me a question. Not too personal, please. Anybody? Where am I from? Okay. Originally, I was born in Northeast North Carolina. Moved to the upstate of South Carolina, spent a long time there. Last year moved to Nashville, North Carolina. Okay? This is a general conversation that we have a lot. Okay? But from that, you can gain a lot of knowledge. If you're familiar with the upstate of South Carolina, that maybe you can infer which college team I root for, and things like that. All of a sudden, a simple context, a simple question, a simple conversation actually divulges so much potential information that we can leverage into building new products, building better security, and things like that. So open source starts with a conversation. Please start the conversation. Ask. Just ask. I've got a good friend, dear friend, who could not be here this year. He's on Twitter. His name is Switch. And he is a case study of mine. He, by his own declaration, is not very technical. But he has done something very interesting. He got on Twitter, and he started talking to people. Everybody, actually. And he just started talking. He started asking questions. He started giving his opinion, giving his thoughts. He had to take, sometimes people would say that he's wrong or point out fallacies in his statements or stuff, and that's fine. But what he did was he started a conversation that it's been like a snowball. Like, I can't even get traction in the community, in this industry that I work in, like he does, and he doesn't actually work in the industry. It is amazing because he started a conversation. Okay? He doesn't write code. He's not a pen tester. He's not a networking ninja or pirate or whatever adjective you want to throw at it. Okay? He switched, and he was curious. So he went to the people he knew had the answers, so that he could get the answers. He could build off of their knowledge and success. So where do we start these conversations? There's a lot of places. These are just a few. Anybody familiar with GitHub? Okay, GitHub is where you go for code. Okay, there was Google Code. There's also Bitbucket, which I put up there, which is another alternative. There's no right or wrong answer. I don't sell tools. I don't promote companies that I don't actually believe in. I'm not endorsed by any of these. Anybody familiar with IRC? It's still a thing. It's still a thing. Hey, I still log into a BBS. Okay, yeah. IRC, Internet Relay Chat. There's a slight learning curve getting into it. But guess what? Metasploit Framework. I'm going to pick on them because I just absolutely love it. They have an entire channel dedicated to nothing but understanding Metasploit. You want to ask how something works? You log in, you get on the channel, you ask the guys who wrote the code how this works. What other industry do you get that much access to the people that actually produce the product? I don't know the Microsoft engineer that still implements Telnet. I'd like to have a conversation with him. I don't know who gets it. I can find out who implements something in Metasploit. One, because it's in GitHub. I can see everybody that's made a change, everybody that's made a commit, and things. I also can submit, hey, this didn't work. I have an issue. I found a bug. Who do you report Microsoft bugs to? Well, they've got this whole system, but it's an automated system, and you're probably never going to hear from somebody. These tools, Twitter, okay? This is a little rantish. I understand that. Twitter is an amazing platform for information security because it's the only really real-time news platform that exists, okay? You have to do a lot of self-filtering. You have to figure out what content you're going to essentially process and what you're just going to ignore. But if you can get in and you get engaged, oh my word, it's absolutely amazing the amount of information that you can process, the amount of things that are going to be shot over to you at 140 characters at a time. It is amazing. The moment things happen, you know about it. You know it. You're not going to see it on Ars Technica and Wired.com and all this other stuff. No, you're going to find the guys who actually did the research, the ones that are disclosing it to them, and you're going to know it before everybody else. Why? We move fast. Twitter's a great platform. It is a great platform to get engaged, to ask questions. Anybody want to ask me a question? Twitter's the easiest way to do it. One, because you're limited to 140 characters, but also I'm always on there. Because I encourage it. I want people to, how did I get started? I ask questions. How do other people get started? They ask questions. So Twitter is a great one. If you are more inclined for code, definitely check out GitHub and stuff. But did you know that you can contribute to open source projects and never write a single line of code? Everybody in this room has the ability to do something that if I had the money, I would pay every single one of you guys to do. How to get started? Ask questions. Have you ever stumbled across a project where you had to figure out how it worked because nobody explained you need to do this step, or better yet, it goes from step A to D because the author made assumptions that aren't true, like he assumed something that's not true? If you know something, write a how-to. Document. 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 Documentation is the single greatest failure that we have in open source and in information security. I know something, but I didn't write it down. I know an exact process, I didn't write it down. Guess what? One of the easiest ways to get involved in any community is to go through, take something that doesn't have documentation or poorly written documentation, and rewrite it. Fix the grammar, please. Mine's horrible. Literally, you pull a pull request for grammar, you're my best friend. Because I really am bad at it. I know it's a weakness of mine. And so somebody's like, yeah, I'm about to go grammar Nazi, and I just went, thank you. I mean, seriously, thank you. Documentation is one of the things that we're just missing, okay? Trey mentioned about getting rid of the secrets, sharing data. How are we going to share that data? Through proper documentation. Having a detailed process of how things work and why they work. The biggest and most successful open source projects, they have the single best documentation. That's science. Yes?
Yeah, one thing, documentation. Never assume that the reader knows anything.
Now, I'm just getting to that. The reason why I want non-technical people to write my documentation is because non-technical people just wrote my documentation. Okay? I can talk to you in Geekanese, Nerdology, or any other IT languages, our acronyms and everything else that we throw around like ninja stars. The general everyday user is not going to understand it. Okay? If you can explain it to your 3-year-old, you pretty much are going to be golden. I cannot explain squat to a dog. Okay? I have to try to explain my mom what the difference between a desktop and a wallpaper is. And I get frustrated. Okay? I'm not very good at documentation. This is where people getting started in information security, this is one of my points, is document everything. If you know how to do something, if you understand it, write it down. Put it out there for somebody to see. Why? Because it goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning. You may be answering the question that is yet to be asked. Okay? If you struggle for 5.5 hours to solve a single install problem, and you finally figure out the workaround, how many people do you think struggled for 5.5 hours for the same install problem? Don't be greedy. Share the wealth. Save me time because I'm going to save you time down the road. Documentation. Seriously, we are very bad at this. Okay? Technical people, code writers, yeah, documentation just doesn't happen. We may make a few comments in the code that are just as cryptic as the actual code because we've done it shorthand and all this other stuff and nobody really knows what's going on. Or you come into like a project that I came into one time where there was a line of code that says do the magic. And all we knew is if you took that out, the magic didn't happen. We don't know what the magic was. Okay? That is really, really bad. Why? Because it was something that we couldn't come in and fix because it wasn't well documented. This can help. Students, document. Get in the habit of writing things down. The worst part of my job is writing reports. The best part about my job is my reports have gotten better because I've started a process of documenting myself as I go. I don't have to go back and replay it. I've got it as I'm going. As you're doing things, document. You know, one of the things that I would encourage everybody, especially if this is your first security conference, write about it. A blog, something. Put it somewhere. Record your experiences. Okay? They're insightful. They're impactful. You have no idea what somebody else is going to be able to get from that, and it could be absolutely amazing. You might be the reason that somebody gets into the industry and does something really awesome, like get us to the machine singularity. So, find a project. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be code. It can simply be an organization. It can be a community. It can be an effort. Doesn't matter. Work to the current documentation. Okay? If there's documentation, follow it to a T. It'll break, almost guaranteed. But that's going to give you, it's going to show you where the deficiencies are and where you can step in. Going, hey, there's obviously, you went from 1 to 47. What happened? Let me see if I can work through it. You may not be able to solve it, but put what you've got up there. Somebody else is eventually going to figure it out. Did it work? Probably not. But if it did, awesome. If not, find out why, submit a pull request, and celebrate your first contribution to open source. Okay? This is from a code, from a technical standpoint, from a documentation standpoint. Really, your first contribution to open source is showing up to this conference. If this is your first time, welcome. You will be back. It's addictive. It's absolutely an amazing industry to be a part of, and understand everybody here plays a role because none of us have the same experiences. And you guys are doomed to repeat my failures if I don't educate you on what my failures were. I have about 5 minutes. Last slide, and this is a rant. The whole thing's actually been a rant. You just guys didn't know it. So I come out of the open source world. I've worked on many projects. I've released a few into the public. I've had a few that have gotten squashed miserably. But there's one consensus that I have, and if you take out anything out of this presentation, it's going to be this. If you write it, publish it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. May not be comfortable, because a lot of people's like, oh, I don't want you to look at my code, or I don't want you to look at my thoughts, or whatever. If you want privacy, keep it in your head. It's the only place that privacy really exists. The moment you start sharing it with anybody, you've lost the right to privacy. So at this point, you might as well get as many eyes on it to see if the concept's good. Write it. The reason why you should publish everything you write, I don't care if it's a blog post, or an actual technical specification, or a white paper, or a really cool software tool that does the magic on a pen test. And if you write that, I want that. It doesn't matter what it is. Put it out there. Get a voice in the community. Start the conversation. It's the only way we're going to fix the problems, okay? Security is a systemic problem. It's not my problem. It's not your problem. It is our problem. And right now, we are not the solution because we're not working to actually solve that common goal together collectively. Everybody's in their isolated groups. We have all these companies that are keeping these trade secrets and stuff. I understand proprietary. I get it. You got to make money. I don't have a problem with that. Okay? But when you know something that could prevent me or another company or another individual from a lifetime of heartache, we share it. How many, most of us are adults and stuff, and we've probably talked to kids and stuff, especially like teenagers and stuff, when they get like their first boyfriend, girlfriend, and it doesn't go well, and it ends, and they're all sad and stuff, and you know, there's other fish in the sea and all this stuff. No, we share our experiences with them. It gets better. It's going to be rough, it's going to feel painful and stuff, but it gets better. Why do we do this on an emotional level, but we will refuse to do it on a technical level? Because if the one thing we have that is proprietary, it is our emotions. Science says that. So if you write it, publish it. Put it out there, because you never know if you're going to answer the question that has yet to be answered. So with that, we are done with all 412 slides. And I will take any questions or comments. I was joking about the negative. If you didn't like it or whatever, that's fine. We'll talk about it. I do encourage having a conversation with people. It's the only way you're going to learn.